He signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday morning. Clean shirt. Fresh coffee. A man completely certain he was closing a chapter. She never told him about the baby growing inside her. He never thought to ask. For years later, something walked into Marcus's boardroom and stopped every conversation cold. Small, dark eyes scanning the room with an old soul behind them. His own face, miniature, innocent, impossible, staring back at him from across a mahogany table. Every decision he ever made had just arrived to collect. Stay with me. This story will earn your time. Before the boardroom, before the baby, before any of it. There was a Tuesday evening in October, 7 years ago, when Claire Mercer walked into a rooftop party she almost didn't attend. Tired, overworked, wearing a dress borrowed from a roommate because she hadn't done laundry in 2 weeks. She almost turned around at the elevator. She didn't. Marcus Hale found her by the railing, looking out over the city rather than into the crowd. He liked that about her immediately. He told her so. He had a way of making observation feel like intimacy, of taking something he noticed and handing it back to you like a gift. Claire thought he was remarkable. She was right, in a way that made it worse later. 3 days after they met, he called. Not texted. Called. In an era when nobody called anymore, Marcus Hale picked up his phone and dialed her number and talked for an hour and 40 minutes about nothing important. She told her roommate the next morning. Her roommate said, "Marry him." They laughed. 6 months in, Claire had met his mother, attended 4 work events on his arm, and memorized the way he took his coffee. 2 sugars. Oat milk. Stirred, not mixed. Small things become enormous when you love someone. You don't notice you're filing them away until the day you realize you know a person better than they know themselves. She knew Marcus better than he knew himself. That knowledge would eventually save her. They married on a Saturday in June. Outdoor ceremony. White chairs on a lawn. Claire's mother cried through the vows. Marcus's father clapped him on the shoulder afterward and said, "Good choice, son." Like she was a stock pick. Like she was a move made wisely. Claire heard it. She remembered it. Their first home was a 2-bedroom in the city. Claire painted the kitchen herself. A warm yellow she'd chosen from 47 samples. 3 weekends of work. Marcus came home, looked at it, and said it was nice. Then he asked what was for dinner. Yellow curtains. Yellow walls. A kitchen that felt like morning even at midnight. She loved that kitchen. She would think about it later, in a very different house, and feel something she couldn't name. Marcus was ambitious the way some men are hungry, constantly, and never quite satisfied. Director by 31. VP by 34. Each promotion came with a new version of him that Claire had to learn all over again. The version at 34 was harder, quieter in the wrong ways. He stopped asking about her day and started talking about his instead. She was a product designer, genuinely talented, quietly brilliant, and she would come home excited about a project only to watch him wait for her to finish before redirecting to something about his own week. He never meant to be unkind. That was the complicated part. He just stopped seeing her as someone worth being curious about. Appearances mattered to Marcus with a precision Claire found exhausting. The right neighborhood, the right car, the right dinner table when colleagues came over. He once asked her to change her outfit before a company event, not because anything was wrong with it, but because it wasn't what he'd pictured. She changed. She said nothing. That was year 2. By year 3, she'd grown smaller in ways she didn't notice right away. She stopped suggesting restaurants she liked, stopped inviting her own friends over when Marcus had work the next morning, stopped painting things. Her hands, which used to always carry a smear of color, evidence of making, were clean all the time now. Clean hands. Empty weekends. A woman shrinking to fit inside someone else's frame. He never raised his voice. That matters to say. Marcus was not that kind of man. Not the kind who breaks things or slams doors or leaves marks. His cruelty was administrative. Cold. Delivered in the tone of someone managing a problem rather than loving a person. "You're being emotional." His favorite sentence. "You always do this." his second favorite. Both said with the patience of someone who had decided the conversation wasn't worth engaging. Claire started keeping a journal. Small, green cover. She wrote about herself, who she used to be, what she used to want, as if she were trying to find someone she'd misplaced somewhere between year 1 and year 3. She kept it in her nightstand drawer. Remember that journal. By year 4, Marcus was present but absent, attentive in public, invisible at home, working late on Thursdays, then Thursdays and Tuesdays, then most evenings. She watched instead of confronting. She was good at watching. One night, she found a receipt in his coat pocket. She wasn't snooping. She was doing laundry, a thing he had never once done in 4 years. A restaurant receipt, dinner for 2, a place they'd never been together. She put it back exactly where she found it, smooth as coat, hung on the hook by the door. Then she walked to the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub, and stayed very still for a long time. She already knew what was coming. Women like Claire usually do. What she didn't know yet, what nobody could have predicted, was what her body was doing while her marriage came apart. The test came home in a bag beneath her laptop, beneath her planner, beneath the small green journal she still carried everywhere. She bought it 2 neighborhoods over, paid cash, stood the whole subway ride home with one hand on the overhead rail, the other pressed flat against her bag like she was holding something fragile. Marcus was in Chicago, a conference, or something he called a conference. Claire had stopped asking for details around the time she found the receipt. The apartment was quiet when she got home. She liked it quiet now. A year ago, silence between them felt like failure. These days it felt like relief. She made tea she didn't drink, stood at the kitchen counter staring at the yellow walls. They looked different at night, warmer, like the room was trying to comfort her, even when nothing else was. Then she went to the bathroom. She read the instructions twice, set the test on the edge of the sink. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She'd expected them to shake. 3 minutes on the edge of the tub, the same spot where she'd sat 2 weeks ago after finding the receipt. The same cool porcelain under her, the same hum of the building around her. She looked at the test. 2 lines. She sat with that for a long time, not crying, not panicking, just sitting, breathing, letting the information move through her the way cold water moves through a room when you open a window in winter. Inevitable, bracing, real. She was pregnant. Her husband was having an affair. Both things true at the same time, in the same bathroom, on the same Wednesday night. She put the test in her jacket pocket, washed her hands, looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment, really looked. Then she turned off the light and went to bed. She slept better that night than she had in months. That detail matters. Remember it. Drop your location in the comments. Where are you watching from today? And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. What Claire decides next is the part of this story that will stay with you. 3 days passed. She went to work, designed 2 interface mock-ups she was proud of, ate lunch with a colleague named Dana, who talked about her vacation and never noticed that Claire was somewhere else entirely behind her eyes. Claire laughed at the right moments, asked the right questions. She was always good at containing things, holding them inside a shape nobody else could see. On the 4th day, Marcus came home from Chicago in a good mood, looser, lighter, the version of him that occasionally reminded her why she'd fallen for him in the first place. He brought her a coffee from the airport, kissed her cheek, asked about her week. "Fine," she said. She studied his face while he talked, the way his mouth moved, the way he laughed at his own joke before finishing it, the way he was completely, peacefully unaware that his wife was carrying his child. He had no idea. And in that moment, watching him pour a glass of water like a man with nothing on his conscience, Claire made a decision. Not from anger, from clarity. There's a difference, and women who've been where Claire was understand exactly what that difference feels like. She was not going to tell him. Not yet. She needed to know what he was going to do next, how far he was willing to go, whether the man she'd married had any intention of finding his way back, or whether he was already gone and simply hadn't bothered to say so. She would watch. She was very good at that. Marcus rinsed his glass, said he was going to shower before dinner, and walked past her toward the hallway. He didn't touch her shoulder, didn't pause, didn't feel the weight of what was standing right beside him. He never did. What she couldn't have known, standing in that kitchen with its yellow walls and its borrowed warmth, was that she wouldn't have much longer to wait. Marcus had already made his decision too. He just hadn't told her yet. She found out on a Friday. Not because he sat her down with kindness. Not because he chose a quiet moment and honored 4 years of shared life with something resembling decency. Marcus Hale did not do it that way. He did it on a Friday evening in November, still in his work clothes, coat not even off, bag still on his shoulder, like the conversation was something he needed to clear before he could properly settle in for the weekend. Claire was in the kitchen, making pasta. The water was already boiling. He stood in the doorway and said, "I think we should end this." He was looking at his phone when he said it. She noticed that. She noticed everything. The fact that he couldn't meet her eyes. The fact that his coat was still on. The fact that he'd chosen a Friday, as if the weekend would somehow absorb the impact. She turned the burner off. "Okay," she said. That wasn't the answer he expected. She could see the small recalibration in his shoulders, a man who'd prepared for resistance and received something quieter instead. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," he said. "I figured it would be easier if we moved quickly. Less painful for both of us. Less painful for both of us." Steam from the pot still rising behind her. The kitchen smelled like garlic and warm pasta water, and the particular cruelty of a normal evening interrupted. Her hand was in her jacket pocket. Her jacket pocket, where the pregnancy test had lived for 4 days. Not because she'd forgotten it, but because she wasn't ready to put it down yet. It had become an anchor, small and plastic and impossibly significant. She thought about telling him, ran the entire sequence in approximately 3 seconds. His face, the shift in the room, how differently this Friday would go if she placed it on the counter between them. She left it where it was. Because here is what Claire understood, standing in that yellow kitchen. Telling Marcus about the baby right now would not bring him back. It would only bind them together in a way neither could escape. A man who chose a lawyer before conversation was not a man who deserved to be handed a reason to stay. She wanted him to stay because he wanted to, or not at all. It was not at all. "Fine," she said. "Have your lawyer call mine." He'd expected tears, or the kind of anger he could manage, the kind he'd spent 4 years labeling as emotional. Not this composed, even-voiced woman looking at him like he was a problem she'd already begun solving. "Claire, I'm going to eat dinner," she said. "You can let yourself out." She turned the burner back on. He stood in the doorway another moment, coat on, bag on his shoulder, the full absurdity of him. And then he left. The front door closed with a soft click. Not a slam. Marcus never slammed doors. She cooked the pasta, ate it alone, washed the bowl, dried it, placed it back in the cabinet. Then she went to the bedroom, opened her nightstand drawer, and took out the small green journal. She didn't write about Marcus. She wrote about the baby. Just one line. "You are wanted. That will never change." She closed the journal, put back in the drawer, lay down on top of the covers still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. The divorce moved quickly. Marcus had been right about that. His lawyer was efficient. The paperwork was clean. No children on paper. No tangled finances. A lease almost up anyway. What they built together fit into a few signed pages and a moving truck. Claire took the yellow curtains. She took the small green journal. She took the cast iron pan and the linen napkins her mother had chosen for them at the wedding. Because her mother had chosen them, and they deserved better than being left behind. She left the ring on the kitchen counter. No note. No ceremony. Just the ring. In the room she'd painted herself. Marcus got the apartment. Claire got everything else. He thought he'd won something the day those papers were signed. He went to dinner that night. Not alone. Ordered a bottle of wine. And felt, for the first time in months, completely light. He had no idea what he'd actually just done. He had walked away from his daughter. He just didn't know she existed yet. And by the time he found out, by the time the weight of that Friday evening finally landed the way it deserved to, Claire would be somewhere else entirely. Building something he couldn't touch. Raising someone he'd never met. Growing so extraordinarily good at her own life that when their worlds collided again, he would barely recognize the woman across the room. But that comes later. For now, a moving truck, a new city, a woman alone with a secret and a plan and one line in a green journal she read every morning without fail. You are wanted. That will never change. She kept that promise. Millhaven was not a city anyone chose on purpose. Claire chose it anyway. She spread 3 options on her kitchen table, looked at each one, and picked the place that felt least like anything she'd known before. Clean slate. Literal and geographic. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with a creaky elevator and a landlord named Gerald who apologized for the noise the pipes made in winter. 2 bedrooms, one more than she needed right now, and exactly one more than she'd have in 6 months. The 2nd bedroom had a window that faced east. Morning light came in early and stayed long. She took it immediately. The first week she did practical things. Found a grocery store. Learned which coffee shop had the fastest Wi-Fi. Figured out the bus routes. A woman building a map of a new life the way a good designer builds anything, starting with structure before adding anything else. Almost nobody knew where she was. Her mother knew. Dana knew. Dana, who had eaten lunch with her for 3 years and never noticed anything was wrong, but who showed up at Claire's old apartment with a casserole and an apology 2 days after the divorce, which meant more than she'd probably ever understand. A handful of others knew the city, not the address. Marcus knew nothing. She wasn't hiding exactly. She was just not announcing. There's a distance between those 2 things that matters enormously if you've ever been a woman rebuilding herself after someone tried to reduce her to the smallest possible version. Her workspace went in the living room. Good lamp. Good chair. Her portfolio updated over the first 2 weeks. Adding work she was proud of. Quietly removing a project she compromised on during the marriage because Marcus had thought the client mattered more than her instincts. Her instincts had been right. They usually were. By week 6, she had 2 freelance clients. By week 10, she had 4. The work was good, the kind she hadn't been able to access when she was smaller, when she was fitting herself into someone else's frame. Something had opened back up. Some part of her that had been politely shut down for years was breathing again. She noticed her hands. Paint on them again, not from a project, but from a small canvas bought at a thrift store for $4. Colors she liked. Shapes that weren't anything specific. Her hands moving across it in the evenings the way they used before she understood that Marcus found it vaguely embarrassing. Just her hands, doing what they'd always known how to do. 7 months in, Nora arrived. Labor was 18 hours. Claire spent it mostly alone. She'd asked her mother to come for the week after rather than the week of, because she needed that particular experience to be hers entirely. She'd done enough things for an audience. This one was just for her. Nora Grace Mercer came into the world at 6:14 in the morning on a Tuesday in July. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Dark hair. Eyes that couldn't decide what color they were settling into yet. A quality she'd keep. Eyes that shifted depending on the light. Claire held her in the early morning quiet of the hospital room and felt something she had no adequate word for. Not joy exactly, though joy was inside it. Not relief, though that was there too. Something older and more animal than either. Something that said, "Here, this is the thing that was always supposed to happen." She looked at Nora's face. She already knew. That chin, that particular set to the brow, even on a face 6 hours old. That stubborn, beautiful, unmistakable chin was not Claire's. Something moved through her. Not grief, not anger. A resigned acknowledgement. A silent noting of the fact that even here, Marcus Hale had shown up without being invited. She decided then that he would not show up anywhere else. Claire took Nora home on a Thursday. Gerald held the elevator door and said she was beautiful. The morning light came through the east window of the second bedroom and landed on the crib Claire had assembled herself. One wrong bolt, and 40 minutes of quiet swearing included. She put Nora down in it, stood at the window for a moment, looked out at the morning. Then she went to make coffee and open her laptop because the rent was due in 3 weeks, and she had a deadline on Friday, and life, regardless of how enormous it felt on the inside, continued to require ordinary things. She liked that about it, actually. The way Tuesday kept arriving whether you were ready or not. Nora grew. She rolled over at 4 months, sat up at 6, pulled herself upright at 9 months, holding the edge of the coffee table with both hands, swaying slightly, absolutely delighted with herself. Claire photographed all of it, not for anyone else, just for Nora, a record of her own becoming, backed up every Sunday without fail. Evidence, not of anything legal, just of a life being built. Nora's first word was more. Second word was no. Third was mama, which arrived late enough that Claire had started to wonder, and landed with enough force that she sat down on the kitchen floor and cried for the first time since the divorce. Happy crying, the specific kind that surprises you. By Nora's first birthday, Claire had a steady roster of clients, a small professional reputation in Millhaven's design community, and a daughter who ate blueberries by the fistful and had strong opinions about which books got read at bedtime. She's mine, Claire told the one colleague who asked about Nora's father at a networking event. That's the whole story. It was not the whole story, but it was the only part that belonged to anyone else. Marcus Hale remarried 14 months after the divorce. Her name was Serena. She was 31, worked in finance, and carried the kind of effortless polish that photographed beautifully at company events. She was genuinely smart, carefully smart, the kind that knew exactly when to deploy it and when to hold it back. She was not a replacement for Claire. She was a correction. A woman who understood from the beginning that Marcus Hale's life was Marcus Hale's life first, and who had made her peace with that arrangement before the ink dried on the marriage certificate. And Serena was not as simple as Marcus imagined. That difference would eventually matter. But in the early years of their marriage, she was everything he needed on the surface. Present at events, absent from decisions, supportive in ways that required no real cost from him. Claire didn't feel what people expected when she heard. No devastation, no retroactive jealousy. What she felt was something closer to recognition. The understanding that Marcus had found someone willing to play the game she'd eventually stop pretending to enjoy. She wished Serena luck. Silently. Genuinely. She was going to need it. Marcus's career moved the way it always moved. Fast, forward, without pausing to check whether anyone around him was keeping up. Senior Vice President at Hale and Graydon by 34. A corner office. A larger team. His name in trade publications alongside phrases like rising leader and strategic visionary. He framed one of the articles, put on the wall behind his desk where clients could see it during meetings. That detail requires no further comment. Serena attended the promotion dinner on his arm and addressed the color of champagne. They looked correct together, coordinated. Like two people who had chosen each other with an eye for how it all read from the doorway. Marcus gave a short speech, thanked his team, thanked his father, thanked Serena, who smiled at exactly the right moment. He did not think about Claire. That's the part that matters. Not suppressed guilt, not something buried. Marcus Hale had filed Claire Mercer into a folder marked finished and closed it with the efficiency of a man who decided that reflection was another word for inefficiency. He told a colleague once, at a conference bar, that his first marriage had been a learning experience. Nobody pushed further. Men like Marcus were rarely pushed further. 61 miles away, his daughter was deeply committed to a stuffed rabbit named Blue and the complete works of a picture book series about a bear who baked bread. His daughter, who had never once heard his name. Marcus poured himself a scotch that evening and stood at his corner office window looking out over a city he felt entirely in control of. He thought about the quarter's numbers, about a presentation due Monday, about whether Serena had confirmed the reservation for Saturday dinner. He thought about nothing that mattered. Not yet. Nora at 3 was a person with opinions. Strong ones. Specific ones. The kind that arrived fully formed and were delivered without apology, the way only very small children and very confident adults manage. She had opinions about socks. Certain textures were unacceptable, a position she held firmly and communicated loudly. She had opinions about the order of books at bedtime. She had opinions about which cup her water came in and whether the sandwich was cut in triangles or rectangles. And on this particular issue, she was consistent. Always triangles, never rectangles. And if you got it wrong, she would look at you with an expression of patient disappointment that was, frankly, unsettling on a 3-year-old's face. Claire found it hilarious. Privately. Always privately. Funny, this child. Not in the cute baby way that makes adults smile indulgently, but in the way of someone who understood timing, who knew when to pause, who delivered a look or a single word at exactly the moment it would land hardest. Claire watched her sometimes across the dinner table and thought, where did you come from? She knew where she came from. That was the complicated part. The good days had a particular texture. Morning light through the east window. Nora's voice from the second bedroom, narrating something elaborate to Blue the rabbit. Coffee going. The domestic peace of a small life running well. Claire had learned to receive those mornings without bracing for them to end. That had taken time. Deliberate, repeated practice. The choosing to be present rather than scanning the horizon for whatever came to disrupt things. She was still learning, but she was better at it than she'd been at year 2. Better than at year 1. Nora made it easier. Nora was aggressively present. There was no drifting when Nora was in the room. "Mama," Nora said one evening, appearing at Claire's elbow. "I have a question." "Go ahead." "Where did I come from?" Claire set her laptop aside. This was the conversation she'd been gently preparing for without knowing exactly when it would arrive. "You grew inside me," Claire said. "Right here." She touched her own stomach. "For 9 months. And then you were born, and you've been here ever since." Nora considered this with the gravity it deserved. Like a seed. Exactly like a seed. "Did a dad help?" Claire breathed in slowly. "Breathe out." "Yes," she said. "A dad helped make you. But he's not part of our life right now." "Why?" "Because sometimes that's how things are. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It just means our family is shaped a little differently than some others." Nora looked at her for a long moment. The full weight look, the look of a child deciding whether the information she's been given is enough. She decided it was. "Okay," Nora said. Then she went back to the living room and resumed her conversation with Blue. Claire sat at her desk for a few minutes without working. Just sat. The east window was dark by then. Evening, bath time approaching, and the apartment was warm and the lamp made a small circle of light that felt, in that moment, like enough. It was enough. It was around this time that the job offer arrived. Not a freelance contract. An actual position. Senior product designer at a firm called Meridian, mid-sized, well-regarded, growing in exactly the direction Claire had been watching the industry move for 2 years. The salary was real. The work was the kind she wanted to be doing. She wanted it immediately. She also knew what it meant geographically. Meridian's offices were in Carver City, 2 hours from Millhaven by train, a city she deliberately avoided thinking about because it was where Marcus Hale had built his empire, the consulting firm, the corner office, the second wife, the carefully curated life. She pulled up a map, looked at the distance, then pulled up Marcus's company profile, looked at the industry tags, looked at the client list, looked at the conference circuit his firm operated on. Meridian and Hale and Graydon did not share clients, did not share sectors, not directly, but they shared an industry through events, through mutual contacts, through the inevitable proximity of professional worlds smaller than they appeared from outside. Their paths could cross. She sat with that for a long time. Then she thought about the work, the salary, the east-facing office she'd seen in Meridian's team photos. She thought about Nora, who was 3 and portable and whose world was small enough that a new city would expand it rather than upend it. She thought about the woman who had moved to Millhaven with nothing, no job, no network, no plan beyond surviving, and built something real from it. She was not afraid of the city. She was not afraid of proximity. She accepted the position on a Thursday afternoon while Nora was at daycare. Sent the email, closed the laptop, made tea. She called her mother and said, "I'm moving again." Her mother said, "Okay. Do you need help packing?" No drama. Just, "What do you need?" Claire had inherited more from her than she sometimes remembered. That night she started looking at Carver City apartments. Nora fell asleep on the couch halfway through, blue tucked under one arm, mouth slightly open, completely at peace with a world she didn't yet know was about to rearrange itself. Claire looked at her for a long moment, then looked back at the screen. She was not going to Carver City for Marcus. She needed that to be completely clear to herself. First of all, she was going for the work, for Nora's future, for the version of herself that deserved to stop shrinking the map to avoid a man who had never once wondered if she was okay. She was going because she was ready. What she couldn't know, sitting there with her daughter asleep on the couch and the laptop open to apartment listings, was that Marcus Hale had spent the previous week in meetings about a major expansion. New clients, new sectors, a reach that would extend, for the first time, directly into the design industry. The distance between their worlds, already smaller than Claire imagined, was about to get smaller still. She found the apartment on a Saturday morning before Nora woke up. 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms. A landlord named Patricia who responded to emails within the hour and whose listing included a photograph of the east-facing window in the 2nd bedroom, captioned, "Good morning light." Claire booked a viewing that afternoon. She got the apartment. Of course she did. She'd learned by now how to walk into a room and know immediately whether it was hers. Not arrogance, something quieter than that. The confidence of a woman who had built 2 lives and understood what the bones of a good one felt like before the walls were even painted. She didn't paint these walls yellow. She painted them a soft white that changed color depending on the hour. Warm in the morning, cooler by afternoon. Something in between at night when the lamp was on and Nora was asleep and Claire sat at her desk with her tea going cold beside her keyboard. She chose it deliberately. White was not absence. White was every color held in reserve. The green journal was in the nightstand drawer. It still was. The move took 1 weekend. Gerald helped carry boxes to the truck and shook her hand at the end and said he hoped the new place had good pipes. She told him she hoped so too. She meant it. Nora treated the move the way she treated most things, with intense observation followed by complete absorption. She walked through the new apartment on arrival with blue under one arm, inspecting each room with the thoroughness of someone conducting an audit. She approved the 2nd bedroom. She had questions about the elevator. She wanted to know if the coffee shop on the corner had fish crackers. They wanted to check. It didn't. Nora accepted this with dignity and ordered a cookie instead. By end of week 1, the apartment was fully hers. Claire started at Meridian on a Monday in March. The office was everything the photographs had promised. Open floor plan, good light, the kind of organized creative energy that told you within 10 minutes whether a team was functional or performing functionality. This one was real. She could feel it in the way people moved, the way conversations happened at whiteboards rather than in meeting rooms, the way her new manager Priya introduced her without the performance of someone who needed everyone to be impressed. This is Claire. She's going to make our work better. Claire, these are the people who will make your work better. Everyone get back to it. Claire sat down at her desk, opened her laptop. She felt, for the first time in longer than she could accurately measure, exactly in the right place. The work was hard in the way good work is hard. Demanding, specific, requiring the best version of her thinking rather than a careful, compromised version. She stayed late twice in the first week not because she felt she had to, but because she genuinely didn't want to stop. Priya noticed, said nothing directly, but moved Claire onto a more complex project by end of week 2. She was fast. She was precise. She had the instincts of someone who'd been sharpening them for years in smaller spaces. Dana texted from Millhaven. "How's the new city?" Claire texted back, "Like someone made it for me." She meant that. She walked to work when the weather allowed. She learned the coffee orders of 3 colleagues. She found a daycare 2 blocks from the office that had a garden and a reading corner and a teacher named Ms. Okafor who Nora decided, on the first day, was her person. Small roots. Quick and deliberate. She was good at this now. By month 2, her reputation inside Meridian extended beyond her immediate team. She presented at an internal review and received feedback that meant people had been paying attention. Priya told her plainly that she'd been underhired, that her title didn't match her output, and that they'd be correcting it within the quarter. Claire said thank you and meant it without performing gratitude she didn't feel. She was done performing things. His name came up once in those first 2 months. A colleague mentioned Hale and Graydon in passing. Just the name, a reference point in a larger sentence about which firms were expanding. Claire kept her face completely still, said something neutral, moved the conversation forward. Alone in the bathroom afterward, she noticed her own heartbeat. Not panic, something more controlled. The physiological fact of a name landing in a new context. Proof that the body remembers what the mind has decided to move past. She breathed, washed her hands, went back to her desk, said nothing to anyone. Not Dana, not her mother, not the Green Journal, which still lived in the nightstand and which she still wrote in occasionally. About Nora, about work, about the quality of morning light through the east window, about what she was building, brick by careful brick. Month 3 brought a client presentation that required her to lead a full room for the first time at Meridian. 12 people. A significant contract. Priya sat in the back. Not to supervise, Claire understood that, but because she wanted to see her work in the room. Claire stood the front of that room and was not nervous. She was ready. She'd been ready for years, in spaces too small to show it. She walked them through the work with the confidence of someone who understood not just what she designed, but why every decision inside it was correct. She answered questions directly. She pushed back on one assumption with enough precision that the room shifted. The adjustment of people encountering someone who knew more than they'd anticipated. They got the contract. Priya took the team to dinner. Claire ordered what she actually wanted and laughed at something genuinely funny and went home to her daughter and her white walls feeling the particular fullness of a day that had gone exactly the way it was supposed to. Nora was already asleep. Claire paid the evening assistant, checked on Nora, flat on her back, blue wedged under her chin, mouth open, entirely unbothered by the weight of other people's victories, and stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking. Then she went to make tea and open her laptop. An email had arrived during dinner from an industry event coordinator she didn't know personally. Meridian had been invited to send a speaker to the Carver City Design and Innovation Conference. Tier 1 event. Significant attendance. The kind of room where industry reputations were either confirmed or quietly revised. Priya had already forwarded it with a single line. "I told them you'd do it. Let me know if you need anything." Claire read that twice. Then she looked at the conference details. The date, the venue, the list of confirmed attendees from participating firms. She scrolled slowly, carefully, the way you move towards something you already know is there. Hale and Graydon. Confirmed. 3 representatives. She closed the laptop, sat for a moment in the quiet, Nora breathing in the next room, the city outside doing what cities do at night, the white walls holding their color in reserve. Then she opened it again. She wrote back to Priya, "I'm in. Thank you." She was not going to that conference for Marcus. She had to say that to herself and mean it completely. She was going because she was good, because she'd earned it, because the work deserved the room and the room deserved her best version. Marcus Hale being in the same building on the same day was a fact she would manage. She'd managed harder things. She closed the laptop, finished her tea, went to bed. She did not dream about anything she remembered. The conference was held on a Thursday in October. Carver City Convention Center. 14th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a skyline that had no interest in being modest. The kind of venue that told you before you walked in that the people inside consider themselves significant. Claire arrived early. She always did, not from anxiety, but from preference. She liked rooms before they filled, liked knowing the layout, the sight lines, the location of the water station, and the nearest exit. A designer's instinct. You read the space before you inhabit it. She checked in, got her lanyard, found the main hall where she'd be presenting in the afternoon. Third speaker, post-lunch slot. The one that required the most from a presenter because the audience was fed and comfortable and their attention required actual earning. She was ready for that. The pre-conference networking hour was the thing she was least interested in and most practiced at. The particular choreography of these events, business cards, practiced openers, the simultaneous performance of being both impressive and approachable, was something she'd learned to navigate without exhaustion. You picked 3 conversations to main and let the rest be pleasant background. She found her 3 by the time the first session started. A design director from a firm she respected. A product strategist named Joel who asked genuinely interesting questions and listened to the answers. A woman named Bethany who ran her own studio and had a laugh that arrived without warning and took the whole room with it. Claire liked Bethany immediately. They sat together for the first session. The morning moved well. Lunch was a buffet situation in the adjoining room. Round tables. Assigned seating that nobody fully honored. Claire found her table and chose the chair that faced the room rather than the wall. Old habit. She was talking to Joel. He had the enthusiasm of someone who had recently discovered something he couldn't stop thinking about, and she found it genuinely contagious when she felt the room shift. Not dramatically, just a small atmospheric adjustment. The kind only certain people notice. The kind that means someone has entered a space and rearranged its social geometry. She looked up. Marcus was across the room, maybe 40 feet, in conversation with 2 older, suited men, the body language of people being carefully impressed. He was doing the thing he'd always done beautifully, leaning in slightly, making whoever he was talking to feel like the most important person present. It looked good. That was an honest observation, and she made it without additional commentary. 41 now. He carried it the way some men do, as if time had simply refined rather than changed him. Good suit. Same jaw. The practiced ease she'd once found magnetic, and now recognized as a performance she happened to know all the rehearsals for. He hadn't seen her. She looked back at Joel. Sorry, you were saying about the behavioral clustering. She listened. She was present. She asked a follow-up question that was genuinely interested and not manufactured. Her peripheral vision tracked Marcus moving through the room. He stopped at a table 2 rows over. Saturday. Laughed at something. Reached for the water pitcher with the ease of a man entirely comfortable in any room he entered. She ate her lunch. Her afternoon session went exactly as she'd expected, which meant better than most of the audience anticipated. She could feel it within the first 3 minutes, the attentiveness that meant a room had decided to trust you. She didn't rush, didn't oversell, let the work speak in the direct, precise language she'd spent years developing. Applause at the end that was not polite. Bethany caught her eye from the 3rd row and made a face that meant yes. The post-session milling began. Good questions, mostly. She answered each one fully, without the performance of modesty or the opposite performance of confidence. Just, here's what I know. Here's how I know it. Here's what I'm still figuring out. She was signing up for Bethany's spring workshop, her email address, the clipboard, when she felt it. Being looked at, not a glance. Sustained attention with weight. She finished writing, handed the clipboard back, turned around. Marcus was 6 feet away. He was looking at her with an expression she needed a moment to identify, because she'd never seen it on his face in 4 years of marriage and everything after. He looked uncertain. Marcus Hale, who had delivered the end of their marriage from a doorway with his coat still on, who had spoken to a lawyer before speaking to his wife, who had built an entire second life with the breezy efficiency of someone replacing an appliance, was standing 6 feet away from her looking like a man who didn't know what his next move was. She found that interesting. "Claire," he said. Just her name. Nothing attached. No opener. No pleasantry. Just her name, offered like a question he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. "Marcus," she said. Same energy. Clean. Neutral. Returned with exactly the weight it arrived with, and not 1 gram more. He started to say something else. She could see it forming. And then Joel touched her elbow from the left, wanting to continue their conversation from lunch. She turned to Joel, gave him her full attention, took the card, said something warm and specific and real. When she turned back, Marcus was still there. He'd waited. That was new. "You were. That was a strong presentation," he said. "Thank you," she said. Not, "Thank you, that means a lot." Not, "How have you been?" Just, "Thank you." A complete sentence. A closed loop. He looked at her the way you look at something you're trying to recalculate. "It's good to see you," he said. "You seem well." "I am well." Simply. Factually. "Are you based here now?" "In Carver City." "I am." "I didn't know that." "No," she said. "You wouldn't." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. Not for her. She let it sit between them and did not rush to fill it. Something the Claire of 4 years ago would not have been able to do. He nodded slowly. "Maybe we could," he started. "I have to get back to my team," she said. "It was good to see you, Marcus." She smiled. Real, not warm, not cold. Something precise and complete, like a period at the end of the sentence that had already said everything it needed to say. She walked back toward Bethany and the workshop clipboard and the part of the room that was hers. She did not look back. He watched her go. She could feel it, that sustained attention following her across the room. Let him look, she thought. He was very good at that, at noticing things too late, at watching people walk away, and only then understanding what he was looking at. She'd learned that about him in year 1. It had taken her until year 4 to use it. She found Bethany. They talked for 20 minutes about the workshop and 3 other things that had nothing to do with Marcus Hale. Claire laughed twice, genuinely, the kind that arrived without planning. On the train home, she watched the city pass and thought about Nora, who was at Ms. Okafor's until 6, and who would want to hear about the conference the way 3-year-olds want to hear about adult things. Not the details, just the texture. Was it good? Did you do good? Did people clap? Yes, she would tell her. People clapped. What she set aside, deliberately, for a quieter moment, was the look on Marcus's face when he'd first seen her. That uncertainty, that recalculation. It meant something. She didn't know exactly what yet. He didn't sleep well that night. That was new. Marcus Hale was a good sleeper. Had always been, falling quickly and completely into rest with the efficiency he brought to everything else. Serena had commented on it once, half amused, half envious. He was not excellent at it tonight. In the dark of the bedroom, good mattress, good curtains, the kind of room designed for exactly this purpose. He lay staring at the ceiling and ran the same 12 seconds on a loop. Claire turning around. Not the full conversation, just that first moment, when he'd had approximately 3 seconds to observe her without her knowing. She'd been different, not in any way he could easily name. She looked settled, like someone who had arrived somewhere after a long journey and was no longer scanning for the next thing. In 4 years of marriage, she'd had a quality of reaching forward, outward, towards something she couldn't quite name. He'd found it exhausting sometimes, touching occasionally, mostly inconvenient. That restlessness of hers, that persistent sense that she was always in the middle of becoming something. She wasn't reaching anymore. Whatever she'd been moving toward, she'd found, or built it. Knowing Claire, she'd built it. He turned over, closed his eyes, opened them. Serena was asleep beside him, her breathing slow and even. He looked at her profile in the dark for a moment. She was beautiful. She was exactly what he'd chosen. He felt, looking at her, a warmth that was real and also somehow insufficient, and he recognized the insufficiency without wanting to examine it further. He got up, went to the kitchen, stood at the window. The city at 2 in the morning was a different city than the one he operated in. Quieter, more honest. Somehow, he stood there for a while and did something he almost never did. He thought about Claire, not with guilt. He told himself that, and mostly believed it. More with the curiosity of encountering something he'd thought he'd fully closed away, only to find the drawers still open. She presented at the conference. He'd known she was a designer, known she was talented during the marriage. But watching her in that room, with that unhurried authority she hadn't had when he knew her. Or had, maybe, and he simply hadn't looked. He looked her up the next morning, before Serena woke up. Coffee going, phone in hand. The privacy of early morning before the day's version of himself was required. Her professional profile was clean, well-constructed, the kind of digital presence that told you immediately the person behind it understood how people read screens. Of course she did. Senior product designer, Meridian. A string of freelance clients he recognized. Good names, serious work, a portfolio built quietly over years without needing to announce itself. A case study referenced in 2 industry pieces he vaguely remembered seeing and not reading. An essay on design ethics that had, according to the engagement numbers, circulated widely in circles he operated adjacent to. He read the essay. It was very good, clear and precise and confident in exactly the way her conference presentation had been. Something moved in him reading it that he couldn't immediately categorize. Pride felt wrong. Admiration felt insufficient. Something closer to the recognition of having been wrong about something significant for a long time without knowing it. He put his phone down, picked it up. He opened a search bar, typed her name. Then, after a pause he didn't examine too closely, added Carver City. Then Meridian. Different searches, slightly different results. The way you approach something from multiple angles when one straight look feels like too much. He found what he'd been looking for without knowing he was looking for it. A photograph. Local design community newsletter, 18 months ago. Group photo, 6 people, Claire on the left end. Next to her, half visible at the frame's edge, a small hand in Claire's hand. A child. He stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he did the math. He did it the way you do math you don't want to do. Slowly, checking each step twice, hoping somewhere in the calculation there's an error that changes the outcome. There wasn't an error. He set the phone face down on the counter. The coffee maker finished its cycle. The sound of it was embarrassingly loud in the quiet kitchen. Serena moved in the bedroom. A small sound, still deep in sleep. He picked the phone back up, looked at the photograph again. The child was small, maybe 2 in the photograph, which put her at. He recalculated, then calculated again, then put the phone down and stood with both hands flat on the counter and breathed in a way he didn't usually have to think about. He told himself he was jumping. He told himself there were 100 explanations. She could have moved on. She could have met someone in Millhaven. And he stopped at Millhaven because he hadn't known about Millhaven, hadn't known where she'd gone, hadn't asked and hadn't wondered, and now was standing in his kitchen at 7 in the morning, confronting the specific cost of not wondering. The child had dark hair. He told himself that meant nothing. He picked the phone up a 3rd time, looked at the child's face, partially turned away, not fully visible. A small profile and a hand and dark hair, and something about the set of the jaw that tugged at something he couldn't name. He put the phone in his pocket, got dressed, went to work, sat through 2 meetings with the practiced surface of a man in complete control of his morning. Then, at lunch, alone in his office, he took the phone back out. He did the math one more time. Then he sat for a long time with the phone face down on his desk and his hands very still in the corner office window, showing him a city he suddenly felt less certain of than he had at 8 that morning. He thought about calling his lawyer. He picked up the desk phone, set it down. He thought about calling Claire directly. Almost certainly he could find her number. He did not call anyone. What he did instead, and this was the thing that would matter later, that revealed more about Marcus Hale than almost anything else in this story, was nothing. He went home, had dinner with Serena, talked about her week and a renovation they were considering and a dinner party someone had invited them to in November. He was pleasant, present, the version of himself that functioned correctly in the context of his life. And underneath all of it, very quiet, like a window left open in a room you've stopped going into, the math kept running. He knew what it meant. He'd known since the kitchen at 7 in the morning. He just wasn't ready yet to know that he knew. The call came from Dana. Not directly. Dana didn't know enough to call directly, and Claire had been careful about that. But Dana knew Marcus's name. Dana had been there for the casserole and the apology, and Dana moved in professional circles that occasionally overlapped with the edges of Claire's new world. Dana called on a Wednesday afternoon. Claire was at her desk at Meridian, halfway through a feedback round, when her phone lit up with Dana's name. She let go to voicemail, finished the note she was writing, sent it, then listened. Dana's voice was careful. That was the first thing. Dana was not a careful speaker. She was warm and fast, and often said 3 things at once. Careful was not her register. Hey, it's me. Call me when you get this. It's not urgent. Nobody's hurt. I just heard something and I think you should know. Okay, call me. Claire listened to it twice. Then she went to the stairwell. Called Dana from there. Okay, Dana said, without preamble. So you know I've been doing consulting work for Hard Row Creative. Their director Philip plays golf with someone from Hale and Grayton. And apparently, a pause, choosing words. Marcus has been asking about you. Not just professionally. Like, asking about your life. Whether you're settled here. Whether you have a family. Claire said nothing. Claire, I'm here. He specifically asked whether you had a child. The stairwell was quiet. Someone passed through the door at the bottom, footsteps echoing briefly and then gone. Claire stood with the phone to her ear and felt something move through her. Not panic, not surprise. Recognition. The sensation of a thing you've been preparing for arriving at the exact moment you've decided you're ready. She'd been getting ready since the conference. Since she'd seen his face recalculate. How long ago did Philip hear this? She said. Last week. He mentioned it to me yesterday. He doesn't know your situation. He was just gossiping. He had no idea I knew you. Does Marcus know you and I are in contact? No, I don't think so. I was always just your work friend. That was true. Marcus had paid very little attention to Claire's friendships, which meant that now, in this particular moment, Dana was exactly as useful as she was invisible. Okay, Claire said. Are you okay? Yes, genuinely. I've been. She stopped. Chose her words. I've been aware this was a possibility, that he might eventually start asking questions. Have you figured out what you do when it happens? Getting there, Claire said. She thanked Dana, asked her to let her know if Philip mentioned anything further, framed casually, nothing that would feel like surveillance. Dana agreed and asked twice more if Claire was all right, and Claire said yes both times in a way that was true enough to satisfy them both. She stood in the stairwell another minute after she hung up. Then she went back to her desk, opened her laptop, sent 2 more pieces of feedback, attended the 3 o'clock meeting and contributed twice, both times usefully. At 5 she picked up Nora from his Okafor and listened to a detailed account of something that had happened at snack time involving a disputed cracker and a boy named Felix. She made dinner, gave Nora a bath, read 2 books, turned off the light, sat on the edge of Nora's bed for a moment in the dark, listening to her settle. Then she went to her desk and found the contact she'd kept in her address book for 3 years without using. Margaret Osei, family law attorney, Carver City. She'd looked Margaret up 6 weeks after Nora was born, not because she had an immediate problem, but because she was a woman who liked to know things in advance. She'd updated the contact when she moved, kept her stored away carefully for when she was needed. She was needed now. She sent an email, calm and specific. She outlined the situation without emotion. Former spouse, no legal paternity established, child not aware of father's identity, father now potentially seeking information. She asked for a consultation at Margaret's earliest availability. She read it back once, sent it. Then she sat for a while in the quiet of the apartment, Nora breathing in the next room, the white walls holding their color in reserve, the east window dark, the morning's light hours away. She ran an internal inventory, checking for fear the way you check a room after a sound, corner by corner, and it wasn't there. Not in any meaningful quantity. What was there instead was clarity, the particular clean-edged feeling of a situation becoming visible enough to respond to. She'd been operating in the fog of not knowing since the conference, since she'd seen his face recalculate, since she'd come home on the train and tucked the uncertainty away for later. Now later had arrived, and she found she was ready for it. She'd been ready for a long time. She just hadn't had anything to be ready for yet. Margaret replied at 7 the following morning. Efficient woman. Claire approved immediately. They met the following Thursday. Margaret's office was clean and direct, like Margaret herself. No soft lighting, no tissue boxes positioned for anticipated weeping, no decor designed to signal warmth as a substitute for competence. Just a desk and 2 chairs, and a woman who had spent years in rooms where people needed information more than comfort. Claire liked her enormously. She laid the situation out in order. Pregnancy discovered during the marriage. Divorce initiated by Marcus before disclosure. Decision to raise Nora independently. No contact for Marcus. No legal paternity established. No child support sought or received. Margaret listened without interrupting. Made 2 notes. And now, she said. Now he's asking questions through back channels. He saw me at a conference last month. I think he's done the math. Has he contacted you directly? Not yet. Do you expect him to? Yes, Claire said. He just hasn't decided how yet. Marcus likes to be prepared before he acts. He'll want to know his position before he picks up the phone. Margaret looked at her steadily. And what outcome are you hoping for from this meeting? Claire considered the question properly. I want to understand my position, she said. My rights and Nora's rights. I want to know what he can ask for legally and what I can reasonably expect if he pursues it. I'm not looking to disappear. That's not on the table, and it's not what I want for Nora either. She paused. But I want to walk into whatever conversation is coming from the strongest possible ground. Margaret nodded. Made another note. Let's talk about what that ground looks like, she said. They talked for 90 minutes. Claire left with 3 things. A clear picture of her legal position, a list of steps she could take proactively to strengthen it, and the steadiness that came from walking into a hard situation fully informed rather than hoping it resolved itself without her input. She stopped at the coffee shop on the corner before picking up Nora. Ordered her usual. Stood at the window while she waited and watched the street and thought about Marcus in his kitchen that morning. Whenever it had been. Doing the math. Running it again. Sitting with his hands flat on the counter and the weight of what he hadn't wondered pressing down on him. She thought about that and felt something she wasn't entirely proud of and didn't pretend wasn't there. Not cruelty. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the acknowledgement that consequences were moving in the right direction. She collected her coffee. Collected Nora. Walked home through streets that were hers now, fully and without qualification. Marcus could ask his questions. He could do his math. He could sit in his corner office and run the numbers as many times as he needed. When he finally made his move, Claire would already be 3 steps ahead. She always had been. He just hadn't known it yet. He sent an email on a Monday. Claire saw it at 6:43 in the morning, in that window of early quiet she used for thinking that required no interruption. She was at her desk in her robe, working through a design problem she'd been turning over since the previous Thursday, the kind that resolved itself in the background if you gave enough time. It had arrived this morning. She was halfway through writing it up when the notification appeared. She didn't open it immediately. She finished the note, saved it, closed that document, made coffee. The full process, unhurried, the grinder and the bloom and the patience of a pour over done correctly. Poured it into her good mug, the ceramic one Nora had painted at a birthday party craft table, lopsided and orange, and the only mug Claire actually wanted to drink from anymore. Then she opened the email. Carefully written. She could tell from the structure, the way each sentence had been considered before the next one arrived. He knew how words worked on a screen. This one had been drafted more than once. Hi Claire, I hope this finds you well. I heard your presentation at the Innovation Conference last month was excellent. The word around the room was very positive. It was good to see you, even briefly. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'd love to catch up properly if you're open to it. Nothing formal, just coffee if you have time. There's a lot of water under the bridge, and I think it might be good for both of us to talk. Let me know if you're open to it. Marcus. She read it 3 times. Not because it was complicated. It wasn't, beneath the careful construction. It was a man trying to open a door without admitting he needed it open. Every word chosen sound casual, while carrying something urgent. A lot of water under the bridge doing more work than any 5 words should have to. I think it might be good for both of us, framing his need as mutual benefit, making his agenda sound like generosity. Very Marcus. She noticed what wasn't in it. No mention of Nora. No mention of the photograph. No mention of the math he'd been running or the questions he'd been asking through back channels. He was prepared, as she predicted, just not ready to show his hand yet. She held her mug with both hands. The ceramic was warm. She looked at the email for another moment, then at the window. Still dark, the city not yet awake. She thought about what Margaret had said. You are not obligated to respond on his timeline. You are not obligated to make this comfortable for him. What you're obligated to is Nora. She opened a new email, wrote 1 line. I'll have my lawyer reach out to yours. Read it once. Send it. Then she closed the laptop and went to start Nora's breakfast. He replied within 11 minutes. She saw it 2 hours later, between meetings. Claire, I understand. I just want to talk. No lawyers. Can we please just talk? She looked at it for approximately 4 seconds. Did not reply. She understood what he was doing. The please was new. Marcus deployed it sparingly, in situations where he calculated it would work. He was pulling the conversation back into informal territory, where things could be said and unsaid, where nothing was on record. She had no interest in informal territory. She forwarded both emails to Margaret. He's reached out. See below. Margaret replied within the hour. Good. I'll contact his representation this week. Don't respond further until we've spoken. Claire didn't respond further. She went back to work. Presentation review at 2. Team check-in at 4. A project milestone a hit by end of week. She worked through all of it with the same focus she brought to everything, complete, unhurried, the full quality of her attention given to whatever was in front of her. Marcus sent one more message on Thursday. Shorter, less constructed. The draft of a man whose patience had started showing its edges. Claire, I just want to understand the situation. That's all I'm asking. She read it. Forwarded it to Margaret without reply. Margaret called that evening. His lawyer contacted me this afternoon, she said. A firm called Brennan Associates. Competent. Expensive. He's taking this seriously. A pause. Which means he's confirmed what he suspects. He wouldn't retain Brennan if he wasn't fairly certain. What are they asking for? Confirmation of paternity. Visitation discussion. They're leading with conversation rather than demands. They've advised him to come in softly. Try to establish cooperation before anything adversarial. Claire sat at her desk. Nora was asleep. The apartment was quiet in the way it got after 8. What do you recommend? She said. Paternity is not something you can or should resist, legally or ethically. If he's the father, which we both know he is, That's going to be established. The question is what happens after. Visitation, involvement, Nora's relationship with a man she's never met and doesn't know. I've never wanted to keep her from him permanently, Claire said. I want that on record. That's not what this is. I know, Margaret said. Then we negotiate from that position. We establish that you are cooperative and child-focused, that your priority is Nora's well-being and stability, and that any arrangement needs to honor the life she already has rather than disrupt it for his convenience. Yes, exactly that. Then here's what I want you to understand going into this. Margaret's voice shifted slightly. Not softer, just more direct. The fact that you built this life alone, that you asked for nothing, that Nora is healthy and stable and clearly thriving, that is not invisible. Courts see it. Opposing counsel sees it. The narrative of a woman who managed an impossible situation with complete integrity is not nothing. It is, in fact, quite a lot. Claire sat with that. He's going to want to know her, she said finally. A statement of something she'd known for months and was saying out loud for the first time. Most likely. And Nora is going to want to know him eventually. She already thinks about it. She notices things. Then you're ahead of him in the most important way. Margaret said, you've already been thinking about Nora's needs. He's been thinking about his own. They talked for another 30 minutes. Practical things. Next steps. The shape of the coming weeks. After they hung up, Claire sat in the quiet of the apartment. She thought about Marcus reading her one-line reply 11 minutes after sending his carefully constructed invitation. She thought about what those 12 words had done to his morning. The way a door could close with more force than a whole conversation. She thought about Nora, asleep in the east-facing room with blue tucked under her chin. A child who said more and no and mama, and had strong opinions about triangles and trusted the world because the person who built her world had made it trustworthy. That was the thing Marcus was going to have to reckon with. Not Claire's lawyer, not the legal process, though that would come. The fact that Nora was fine. Completely, beautifully, robustly fine. And that the reason she was fine had nothing to do with him. He had missed everything. Every single thing. And now he wanted coffee. She almost smiled. Almost. Margaret filed the initial response on a Wednesday. Formal. Precise. The language of family law. Careful and specific and designed to leave nothing to interpretation. Because interpretation was where things got expensive. Claire read it before it went out. Understood most of it. Asked 2 questions about the section she didn't. Margaret answered both without condescension. The response confirmed Claire's willingness to engage in a cooperative process. It established Nora's current situation. Stable home, consistent care, thriving development, established routines. It outlined Claire's position on paternity confirmation. No objection, subject to appropriate process. It said nothing about visitation yet, because Margaret had advised leaving that for the second conversation. You don't give everything at once, Margaret said. You give them enough to proceed, and you hold the rest for when you need leverage. Claire understood leverage. Brennan Associates replied within 48 hours. They wanted a DNA test within 30 days. Standard, non-negotiable from a legal standpoint, which everyone understood. Claire had never intended to negotiate it. She'd known since the moment she saw those 2 lines on a plastic test in a yellow-walled bathroom that this day would eventually exist. Her peace was made. The test was scheduled for a Tuesday, 3 weeks out. A clinic Margaret used regularly. Professional, discreet, efficient. Nora would need to be present for a cheek swab. Painless. Over in 30 seconds. Claire told Nora about it the same way she told Nora about everything potentially strange or new. Directly, simply, with enough information to answer the questions a 3-year-old would actually ask. We're going to doctor next Tuesday, she said at dinner. Nora looked up from her plate. Am I sick? No. Completely healthy. They just need a little bit of information from inside your cheek. It's called a swab. Like a big cotton bud. Doesn't hurt. Nora considered this. Will I get a sticker? I will personally ensure you get a sticker. 2 stickers. I'll ask. 3. I'll see what I can do. Nora went back to her dinner. She got 3 stickers. The nurse produced them from a drawer without being asked. Nora held all 3 on the way out and narrated their colors in the elevator. Red, yellow, a star-shaped one that was technically gold, but which Nora called orange. And Claire didn't correct her, because she was right that it was closer to orange, and wrong wasn't the right word for a child developing color vocabulary. The results came back in 11 days. Margaret called on a Thursday morning. Claire stepped into the stairwell. Confirmed, Margaret said. One word. Claire had known it was coming. Had known it with complete certainty for 3 years and 8 months. Still, the word landed with weight. Not devastation, not grief. Something more like the closing of a very long parenthesis. A sentence that had been waiting for its ending punctuation, finally getting it. Okay, she said. Brennan will move to visitation discussions now. They've been patient, more patient than I expected. He's not coming in with demands. He's coming in with requests. What are they requesting? An introduction, supervised, neutral location, something brief and low pressure for Nora. The building hummed around her. Someone passed through the lobby 2 floors below, footsteps echoing and fading. He wants to meet her, Claire said. Yes. She'd known that was coming since the conference, since the recalculation on his face, since the math he'd run in his kitchen at 7 in the morning. She'd known, and she'd prepared, and she'd told Margaret from the beginning that keeping Nora from him permanently was not on the table. Knowing something and having it arrive were still different things. What's your recommendation? Claire said. Move carefully. Agree in principle to an introduction. It demonstrates good faith, and it's the right thing for Nora's long-term well-being. But set the parameters. You control the timeline, the location, the duration, the framing. Nothing happens until Nora has been prepared appropriately. How long do we have? A few weeks. They won't push hard in the short term, but they won't wait indefinitely either. A few weeks is enough, Claire said. She knew exactly what she needed to do with those weeks. She started that evening. Not by talking to Nora. Not yet. First, she built the scaffolding. Read everything actually useful. Not the breathless parenting blog posts about blended families, but the research. Developmental psychology. How young children processed new relationships. New configurations of the world they thought they'd fully mapped. She read until she understood the terrain. Then she called her mother. Not for advice exactly. More for the particular grounding of a voice that had known her since before she knew herself. Her mother listened to the full update without interrupting, which was its own form of love. How are you? Her mother said, when Claire finished. Better than I expected. She meant it. And Nora? She doesn't know yet. I'm working out how. You'll figure it out, her mother said. Simply, not as encouragement, as fact. The statement of someone who had watched Claire figure things out for 35 years and had no reason to doubt the pattern. Claire figured it out over the following week. She introduced the concept gradually. Not Marcus, not yet, not by name. Just fathers as something real and present in the world, something Nora was entitled to think about. She let Nora lead, asked gentle questions, and listened carefully, and paid attention to what Nora was actually asking versus what she appeared to be asking, because with Nora those were often different things. Nora was already thinking about it, clear within the first conversation. She'd been storing it the same way Claire stored things, quietly, systematically, in a drawer marked for later. A 3-year-old version of her mother's instinct. The legal process continued in the background. Margaret and Brennan exchanged correspondence. A framework for the introduction began to take shape. Date range, location, duration. Nothing signed yet. Everything provisional. Marcus, through his lawyer, accepted every parameter Claire set without pushback. That surprised her. She mentioned it to Margaret. It shouldn't, Margaret said. He knows his position. He walked away from a pregnant woman without knowing she was pregnant. He asked for a divorce before she could tell him. He built a life that had no room for the question of whether she was okay. He knows all of that. His lawyer knows all of that. They're not going to fight you on logistics. He could have, Claire said. Legally. He could have. He didn't. Margaret paused. Draw your own conclusions. Claire drew them. Meanwhile, Nora turned 4. The birthday fell on a Saturday. Claire made pancakes, badly shaped rabbits, identifiably rabbits. Nora's verdict: acceptable. Dana drove up from Millhaven with a wrapped gift and her particular brand of warmth that filled a room without effort. Ms. Okafor sent a card. Gerald sent a card. They ate cake at the kitchen table. Nora wore a paper crown she'd made herself. She opened her gifts with the precise deliberation of someone who understood that the opening was its own experience and should not be rushed. Claire photographed all of it. Sunday backup. Evidence of a life. That evening, after Dana had driven home and Nora was in bed, Claire sat at her desk and thought about what Nora's 5th birthday might look like. Whether it would be the same shape as this one or a different shape. Whether there would be new people in it, new things to photograph. She didn't know yet. What she knew was that Nora had fallen asleep happy. Fully, completely, unambiguously happy. Crown still on her head, blue wedged under her chin. The piece of a child who had been seen and celebrated and sent off to sleep full of cake and love. Whatever came next would have to be built around that. Anyone who wanted to enter Nora's life would have to reckon with the fact that her life was already good, already whole, not missing anything exactly, just about to become something larger. And Nora, Claire thought, watching her sleep for a long moment before turning off the light, Nora was going to handle it the way she handled everything. With questions. With patience. With that particular stubborn dignity that had arrived in the world with her and had never once wavered. Her mother's daughter, through and through. The news moved the way news moved in industries like theirs. Not loudly. More like water finding its level. Through the small gaps between professional and personal that people in tight networks pretended didn't exist. Someone knew someone who knew someone. And then it was known. Marcus Hale had a child. A daughter. 3 years old. Mother. His first wife. That was the shape of it. Bare facts, which were never just facts in professional circles. They were invitations to interpret. And people interpreted with whatever they already believed about the person in question. People had things they already believed about Marcus Hale. He was successful. He was polished. He was the kind of man who inspired a particular brand of professional admiration that had always contained, for those paying close attention, a small reservation. Something slightly sealed. Something that functioned correctly but didn't entirely invite you in. The bare fact landed in that reservation and spread. Serena found out on a Tuesday. Not from Marcus. That was the part that mattered most. And that Marcus, if he was honest with himself, understood was a failure he couldn't explain his way out of. She found out from a woman at her gym. A woman she liked, who moved in some of the same professional circles, who had heard it from her husband, who had heard it at a dinner that Marcus had also attended but left early from. That early departure, in retrospect, carried its own significance. Serena came home that Tuesday evening and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at Marcus with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. Not anger, not tears, something more interior. The look of a person reorganizing information they thought they already had. "Is it true?" she said. He didn't insult her by asking what she meant. "Yes," he said. She nodded. Once. Slowly. The nod of someone confirming a suspicion rather than receiving a surprise. "How long have you known?" "A few months. And before that." He looked at her. "I didn't know she existed." Serena was quiet for a long moment. She moved to the kitchen table and sat down. Serena, who almost never sat, who processed emotion. Sitting meant something. "You didn't know," she said. Not a question. Not quite an accusation. Something in between. "She didn't tell me during the divorce. I think I understand why now." "Do you?" He was quiet. "Marcus." Her voice was even. controlled in a way that cost her something. Did you give her a reason not to tell you? The question sat in the kitchen between them. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. He thought about the receipt in his coat pocket. The coat he'd worn and she'd laundered because he'd never once done laundry in 4 years. He thought about the divorce delivered from a doorway with his bag still on his shoulder, like a transaction to clear before dinner. He thought about the lawyer he'd retained before the conversation he'd never had. Yes, he said. I think I did. Serena looked at him for a long time. Then she got up and went to the bedroom and closed the door. Not a slam. Serena didn't slam doors either. They had that in common. But closed with a finality that said the evening was over and she needed the space to think without him in it. He stayed in the kitchen. He deserved the kitchen. The board found out the following week. A board member named Richard, 63, careful, the kind of man who had built things slowly and regarded anyone who built things too fast with measured skepticism, pulled Marcus aside after a quarterly review meeting. The others had filed out. Richard poured himself water from the pitcher on the table and didn't offer any to Marcus, which was itself a statement. I'm hearing things, Richard said. I know, Marcus said. A child. Yes. Richard looked at him steadily. He had daughters, 3 of them. Marcus had watched Richard with them at company events over the years, noticed the particular quality of attention Richard gave his children, like they were the most interesting people in any room, like nothing else competed. How old? Richard said. 4. Richard nodded, set his water glass down. And the mother? She handled everything alone. She didn't ask for anything. He paused. She didn't ask for anything. He'd said it twice. He noticed that. Richard noticed it too. That's not a virtue of yours, Richard said. That's a consequence of hers. The words landed with the force of true things, said without cruelty. Marcus absorbed it without deflection, without the practiced smoothness that had always been his first response to friction. I know, he said. Richard picked up his water glass, looked out the window for a moment at the city below. Fix this, he said. Whatever fixing looks like. Not for the firm. For yourself. A pause. And for the child. He left. Marcus stayed in the conference room alone. He sat in the chair Richard had been using and looked at the city through the window and thought about what fixing looked like. He'd been thinking about it for months. Since the kitchen. Since the photograph. Since Claire's 12-word email that had closed every informal door and left only the formal ones. He'd been circling something that required more honesty than he'd so far managed. He was managing more honesty now. Slowly. In increments. Serena came back to the bedroom that night. She didn't discuss it further. She processed completely before returning to a conversation, and her processing happened in private. But she came back. She lay beside him in the dark. After a long silence, she said one thing. You need to be better at this than you were. Not, fix it for us. Not, do this or else. Just the plain statement of a minimum standard, delivered without drama. He thought about that sentence for a long time. At work the following week, something had shifted. Not dramatically, a change in air pressure. Subtle, pervasive, felt before it was understood. A colleague who'd always been warm was warm, but more measured. An email that might previously have been copied to him wasn't. A conversation that stopped when he entered a room and resumed when he left. He noticed all of it. He was good at noticing things. The irony of that was not lost on him. For years of marriage to a woman he'd failed to notice. And now his capacity for observation was suddenly working correctly. He thought about Claire at the conference. Settled. Not performing composure. Actually in possession of it. He thought about her essay, which he'd read twice more since that first morning. The line that had stayed with him without his permission. Good design begins with the assumption that the person you're designing for has a life that exists entirely outside your awareness of it. She'd been writing about design. He understood now she'd been describing something else as well. He called his personal lawyer on a Friday afternoon. An older man named Carver who'd handled his affairs since before the first marriage and who had no patience for performance. I want to do this right, Marcus said. Define right, Carver said. Whatever is actually best for the child. Not best for my position. Not best for the firm. What's actually best for her? A pause. That's going to require some things from you. I know. Things that might feel costly. I know. And you're prepared for that. He looked out his corner office window. The city below. The view he'd worked toward for 20 years as proof of something he was no longer entirely sure he'd proven. I'm getting there, he said. It was the most honest thing he'd said in months. Maybe longer. Claire told Nora on a Sunday. Not because Sunday was special or strategic, because it was the day that felt right when it arrived. The way certain moments announce themselves as the correct moment before you fully decided. Saturday had been too busy, too much of Nora's energy spent on a play date with a girl from daycare named Iris who had a trampoline and very strong opinions about its usage. Sunday morning arrived quiet and soft. Nora was in one of her settled moods, content to move slowly, to sit near Claire on the couch with a book, to exist companionably without demanding anything from the day. Claire made pancakes, not rabbit-shaped this time, just round, ordinary, the kind that didn't require performance. They ate together at the table. Nora narrated a dream she'd had about Blue going to school, which was elaborate and internally consistent in the way Nora's dreams always were. Claire listened fully, asked 2 questions, refilled Nora's juice. Then, when the plates were cleared and Nora was still at the table with a crayon she produced from somewhere, drawing horses on the back of a receipt, always horses lately, galloping across whatever surface was available, Claire sat back down. Hey, she said, can I talk to you about something? Nora didn't look up from her horses. Yes. Remember a while ago when you asked me about your dad? The crayon slowed. Nora looked up. The one who helped make me, she said. Like a seed. Exactly. Claire held that image for a moment. Her daughter's precision, her retention, the way she'd kept that conversation intact for whenever it became relevant again. I have some new information to tell you. About him. Nora set the crayon down. She did this when something required her full attention, put down whatever was in her hands, and turned her whole body toward you with the seriousness of a small person who understood that some conversations deserved to be met completely. She'd done it since she was 2. Claire had never taught her. She'd simply arrived with it. Okay, Nora said. His name is Marcus. He lives here in Carver City. And he knows about you now. He knows that you exist and that you're here, and he would like to meet you someday. If you want to. Nora was quiet, not the silence of overwhelm. Claire knew that silence, had seen it occasionally, knew its texture. This was the silence of processing, of a mind that had been given real information and was taking it seriously. Why didn't he know before? Nora said, because I didn't tell him. When he and I stopped being married, I wasn't ready to tell him yet. And then time passed, and we weren't in each other's lives, and it got complicated in the way grown-up things get complicated sometimes. Were you scared to tell him? The question was so precisely aimed that Claire sat with it for a moment before answering. She prepared for many versions of this conversation, not for that specific question delivered in that specific way. A little, she said. Honestly, I wanted to make sure you were safe and settled first. I wanted to make sure our life was good before I added something new to it. Nora considered this. Then she asked the second question. Does he know about me now? Yes. Did you want him to? 2 questions. Clean and direct and straight to the thing, because Nora did not approach things sideways. She went at them head on. Socks and crackers and bedtime books, and now this. Her father's existence, handled with the same unadorned directness. Claire breathed in. I think, she said slowly, that eventually, yes. I always wanted you to be able to know him if you wanted to. I just needed to make sure the timing was right for you. Nora looked at her for a long moment. The full weight look. The trust look. The look of a child deciding whether the information she's been given is enough. She decided it was. Okay, she said. Then she picked up the crayon and went back to her horses. Claire sat at the table for another minute. She didn't trust herself to stand immediately. Her legs felt the heaviness of adrenaline that had nowhere to go. The body's preparation for a hard thing that had turned out to be survivable. Better than survivable. Nora drew 3 more horses in silence. Then, without looking up, "Does he like horses?" Claire almost laughed. The almost of it lived right behind her eyes. "I don't know," she said. "You could ask him someday." "Maybe," Nora said, non-committal, a child reserving judgment. Then, "Does he know about Blue?" "Not yet. Blue should probably meet him first," Nora said. "To check." "That seems very reasonable," Claire said. Nora nodded. "Case settled." She finished her horse. This one mid-gallop, legs extended, mane flying, the freedom of an animal that went exactly where it wanted, and held it up for Claire to see. "Good," she said. "Really good," Claire said. Nora seemed satisfied. She slid off her chair and went to the living room, and that was that. The conversation was complete. Integrated. Nora had received the information, processed it in the Nora way, produced a verdict, and moved forward. Claire sat at the kitchen table alone for a few minutes. She thought about the bathroom in the yellow-walled apartment, the edge of the tub, 2 lines on a plastic test, the way she'd sat very still and let the information move through her, and then gone to bed and slept better than she had in months. Nora had her instincts. Clearly. Exactly. She texted Margaret, told Nora. "She handled it better than I did." Margaret replied within minutes. They usually do. "Ready to schedule the introduction?" Claire looked at the text. Through the doorway, she could see Nora in the living room, flat on her stomach, Blue propped upright beside her, as an audience while she drew more horses, narrating something elaborate and private. Her voice a low, continuous murmur, her world complete and orderly and entirely her own. She typed back, "Yes. Let's set a date." The weeks that followed had a purposeful quiet, like the period between deciding to do something and actually doing it. The legal framework was finalized. Terms agreed. A date set for a first meeting. A Saturday morning, a children's museum across the city that Margaret had suggested and Claire had researched thoroughly and approved for its layout, its exits, its quality of being a place designed entirely around a child's comfort and not an adult's. Nora was told the date. She asked 3 questions. Would there be horses at the museum? Was Blue allowed? Could she leave if she wanted to? Yes to the second. Probably not to the first, but they would check. Absolutely yes to the third. And Claire made sure that answer landed, that Nora heard it fully and understood that leaving was always an option. Nora nodded. Good. Claire emailed Margaret the night before the meeting. Not about logistics. Those were handled. She wrote something she hadn't fully planned to write. The kind of honesty that arrived in the late quiet of an apartment after a child was asleep. "I keep trying to identify what I'm feeling, and I can't find a single word for it. It's not fear. It's not grief. It's not even hope exactly. It's more like standing at the end of something and the beginning of something at the same time, and not being sure which direction to look." Margaret replied the next morning. "Look at Nora. That's always the right direction." Claire read that at 6:40 in the morning, sitting at her desk, coffee in the ceramic mug, the east window beginning to hold the first gray hint of morning light. She closed the laptop, got up, went quietly to Nora's room. Nora was asleep, flat on her back, Blue tucked under one arm, mouth slightly open, one hand curled near her cheek, the abandon of a child who'd never once questioned whether she was safe. Claire stood in the doorway, just looked. The morning light came through the east window and landed on Nora's blanket and the shelf above her bed where the horses she'd drawn this week were lined up, 6 of them, all mid-gallop, all going somewhere with complete confidence. Claire looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she went to make breakfast. That night, after a full day of ordinary things, Nora stood in the bathroom doorway while Claire ran her bath and said, without looking up from Blue, "Mama, yeah. Will you still be my person after tomorrow?" Claire turned off the tap. She crossed the bathroom in 2 steps and crouched down to Nora's level. took her face in both hands, gently, the way you hold something irreplaceable. Always, she said, that is the one thing that will never change. No matter what tomorrow looks like or what comes after it. You are mine and I am yours, and that is permanent. Okay. Nora looked at her. That look. The full weight one. Okay, she said. Then she handed Blue to Claire, stepped into the bath, and asked if they could do the boat game tonight. They did the boat game. Later, after Nora was asleep, crown from last Saturday's birthday, still hanging on her bedpost, horses on the shelf, Blue in her arm, the whole small, perfect world of her exactly where it was supposed to be. Claire sat on the edge of Nora's bed in the dark. She stayed for a long time, not because she was afraid, not because she was sad, because this version of things, just the two of them, the east window, the white walls, the horses and the ceramic mug, and the Tuesday mornings and the way Nora said mama, with such complete ownership of the word. This version had been everything. It had been more than enough. It was about to become something larger. And Claire, sitting in the dark beside her sleeping daughter on the eve of the day that would change the shape of their life, felt what she always felt when she'd built something real and true and good. Ready. The Children's Museum opened at 9. Claire and Nora arrived at 8:55. Nora had Blue under one arm and had selected her own outfit with characteristic precision. Red corduroy pants, a yellow shirt with a small bird on the pocket, her white sneakers which she'd insisted on despite the weather. She looked like herself. Completely, exactly herself. They checked in at the front desk. A staff member named Joy, her actual name, on a badge, which Nora pointed out as remarkable, showed them to the section Margaret had arranged. A dedicated room, off the main floor. Bright, low tables, art supplies along one wall, a building block section in the corner, a reading nook with soft seating, and a collection of picture books that Nora assessed within 30 seconds and declared adequate. There were horses in an adjacent exhibit, the carousel kind. Nora's eyes went straight to them through the glass partition. Claire had checked in advance. Of course she had. After, she said, before Nora could ask. Nora accepted this with dignity and went to investigate the art supplies. They had 15 minutes before Marcus was due. Claire sat in a chair near the reading nook, not hovering, not far, exactly close enough. She watched Nora move through the space with her usual audit precision, touching things, deciding what was worth her time. She looked like someone who owned every room she walked into. She always had. At 9:10, Claire heard the door. She didn't look immediately. She gave herself 3 seconds, a breath in, a breath out, and then she looked. Marcus stood in the doorway. He looked different from the conference. Less composed, not disheveled. Marcus didn't do disheveled, but the performative ease was absent. He was wearing a jacket she didn't recognize, dark, and his hands were in his pockets, and he stood there with the body language of someone who had rehearsed this moment 100 times and understood, now that it was here, that no rehearsal had actually prepared him. He saw Claire first. She nodded. Once a greeting without warmth or coldness. Purely functional. The acknowledgement of a person who had agreed to be in a room together for a specific purpose. He nodded back. Then his eyes moved to the small figure at the art table across the room. Red corduroy pants, yellow shirt, white sneakers, dark hair, Blue propped against a cup of crayons as a witness while she drew with total concentration. Marcus went very still. Claire watched his face. She'd wondered about this moment, had tried to imagine it, couldn't fully, because some things refused to be imagined in advance. They only existed in the having of them. And what she saw on his face was something she hadn't prepared for, because she prepared for many things and not this. Not the complete dissolution of the managed surface. Not Marcus Hale, who had delivered a divorce from a doorway with his coat on, who had spoken to a lawyer before speaking to his wife, looking like a man whose composure had no protocol for what was standing across the room from him. His eyes were wet. She noted it. Said nothing. Nora, With the instinct of a child who sensed attention the way some people sensed weather, looked up from her drawing. She looked at Marcus. He looked at her. The room held its breath. Nora assessed him the way she assessed everything, directly, without embarrassment, with the full weight of her attention. She looked at his face for a long moment, then at Claire, then back at Marcus. "Are you the horse person?" she said. Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry. Mama said I could ask you if you like horses." Factual. Informational. Completing an errand she'd been holding since Sunday. Something moved across Marcus's face. Several things, in rapid succession, none of which he managed to fully contain. "Ah, yes," he said. "I like horses." Nora considered this data point. "Blue has to meet you first," she said. She picked up the rabbit from beside the crayon cup and held it up. "This is Blue." Marcus looked at the rabbit. His jaw moved slightly. He swallowed. "Hi, Blue," he said. Nora studied him while he said it. Whatever she was looking for, whatever the criteria Blue's introduction was designed to assess, she appeared to find it sufficient. She set Blue back against the crayon cup. "You can come in," she said, and turned back to her drawing. Marcus stood in the doorway for one more second. Then he walked in. He came at Claire first, which was right, which was the only correct thing, and stopped a few feet away. He looked at her with an expression that carried everything he hadn't said in any email, any lawyered correspondence, any carefully constructed message. "Thank you," he said. Just those two words. She held his gaze for a moment. "This is for her," she said. "Not for us. Be clear about that with yourself." "I am," he said. She believed him. Not entirely. Not yet. But enough for today. He moved toward the art table slowly, as if he understood that the usual pace of his life was wrong for this room. He pulled out a small chair, designed for a 4-year-old and comically undersized for a grown man in a dark jacket, and sat down at the table. Nora glanced at him sideways. Continued drawing. "What are you drawing?" he said. "Horses. They're galloping. Can I see?" She turned the paper toward him. He looked at it. At the line of horses mid-stride, manes flying, legs extended, going somewhere with complete confidence. "They're really good," he said. Nora looked at him to check whether he meant it. He meant it. Children always could tell. "I know," she said. She turned the paper back, drew another horse. Then, after a moment, "Do you want to draw one?" "I'm not very good at drawing," he said. "That's okay." She pushed a piece of paper toward him across the table, placed a crayon on top of it. Blue was watching. "You could try." He picked up the crayon. Claire sat in her chair by the reading nook and watched Marcus Hale, VP of Hale and Graydon, corner office, 41 years old, and entirely unmoored from every version of himself he'd ever performed, try to draw a horse at a child-sized table with a green crayon, while a 4-year-old supervised. He drew something that was more oval than horse. For lines for legs. A suggestion of a mane. Nora looked at it. "That's not really a horse," she said. "No," he agreed. "It's not." "It's okay," she said. Generous. "I can teach you." Claire looked down at her hands. She breathed. She thought about the Tuesday morning a man had signed papers with his coat on and walked out of a yellow-walled kitchen thinking he'd closed a chapter. She thought about a bathroom and a plastic test and a decision made in stillness. She thought about Millhaven and the creaky elevator and Gerald and the east-facing window and Nora's first word and the green journal in the nightstand and the ceramic mug and all the ordinary Tuesday mornings that had made up the extraordinary life she'd built from nothing. She looked up. Across the room, Marcus was attempting a second horse under Nora's instruction. She was pointing at the paper with her crayon, explaining something precise and serious about the angle of the legs. Marcus was listening, actually listening, leaning in slightly the way he'd always done when he wanted someone to feel heard. Except this time Claire understood it was real. He was listening to his daughter explain horses. His daughter, who had his chin and her mother's eyes and had decided, in the span of 15 minutes, that he was provisionally acceptable. His daughter, who had required Blue's approval first. His daughter, who had been fine, completely, beautifully, robustly fine, and who had been loved in a wholeness by a woman who'd had every reason to come apart and had instead built something extraordinary. Claire thought about all the things Marcus had thought he'd won over the years. The divorce, the second marriage, the corner office, the article on the wall, the city seen from a great height. She thought about what he was actually looking at right now. She thought he was beginning to understand the difference. She did not feel triumphant. She felt something quieter, deeper. The piece of a long story, arriving at the moment it was always moving toward. Not an ending, not exactly. More like a clearing. A place where the trees opened up and the light came through, and you could finally see, in all directions, how far you'd come. Nora held up Marcus's second attempt. Better than the first. Still not good, but better. See, Nora said, you just have to practice. Marcus looked at the horse. Then, for the first time since he walked through that door, he smiled. Not the practiced one. Not the conference smile, or the boardroom smile, or the event photograph smile. Something smaller. Something real. Yeah, he said. I'm learning that. Claire stood. She walked to the glass partition and looked through at the carousel horses in the adjacent exhibit. Frozen mid-gallop, painted and bright, going nowhere and everywhere at once. She put one hand on the glass. Behind her, she could hear Nora explaining the importance of the mane, the specificity of her voice, the patience of it, the absolute authority of a small person in complete command of her subject. Behind her, she could hear Marcus listening. She stayed at the glass for a moment longer. Then she turned back to the room. Her daughter, her life, this version of it, this new and larger shape of it. Beginning now in a children's museum on a Saturday morning with crayon horses and a stuffed rabbit and a man sitting in a chair built for someone a third of his size, trying to learn something he should have started learning years ago. In the corner, Nora tucked Blue under her arm and held up another drawing for Marcus to see. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But it was a beginning. And Claire, who had built everything she had from nothing, knew exactly what to do with the beginning. He learned to draw horses. Not well. Not even close. But he showed up the following Saturday, and the one after that, with a piece of paper he practiced on during the week, and Nora graded every single one. Some things arrive the way justice arrives. Quietly, without announcement, on a Saturday morning, with a green crayon and a stuffed rabbit named Blue and a man learning, finally, to pay attention. That is where this story ends. Not in a courtroom, not in an argument. In a children's museum, with the beginning of something neither of them could yet name, but both of them, in their own way, were ready for. There's something I want you to know before you go. Claire knew, the morning she sent that one-line email, that Marcus would eventually find his way back. She didn't stop him. She just made sure that when he arrived, she was already standing on ground he could never take from her. Watch our next video. It will show you exactly what Claire did in those 4 years that made her untouchable.